Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hatch webinar today. It's December 4th. We are talking about inside the contact center. We have a really cool discussion lined up for you guys today. Before I introduce our guests, I'd like to ask you guys a question as we're letting other people trickle in. I want to know where you're at with your contact center. Do you have one? Are you looking to grow it? How big is it? Are you the one contact center person? I just would love to get some context on who is here and listening and what you guys kind of want to know. So put it into the chat. There's always a little bit of an awkward silence now because there's a little delay. So, we'll be quiet for a second. But Chris, you're getting in there.
Yeah, I think John said he doesn't mind beatboxing and creating. No?
Yeah.
Here we go. I can drop a beat.
There he goes. Kristen, what's up?
I like seeing that other Kristen M on there.
Yeah.
Love it. Hello, Logan. Hello, Norma. Norma is in all caps. She is feeling loud and proud today.
She's feeling good. She's feeling good.
Yep.
She's like, it's Wednesday. It's 2 p.m. I'm feeling good.
Yep. Frank, 3 agents looking to grow. Love it.
Ray,
Yep.
What's up, Ray?
Got 3 to 4 agent call center.
Nice. I like the energy.
Yeah, I'm loving it.
This is great. This is actually really helpful.
Ian doesn't have a contact center. He just wants to go.
Strong idea for an icebreaker.
Inbound.
All right, Ray's got 8. I'm going to mispronounce this. Rylia? 2 lead setters.
Rylia.
Okay,
Riley is interesting though, John, that transition from just inbound to creating an outbound motion. We'll get into that today. Yeah, we should talk about that today.
Yeah. Maybe we just throw away the whole agenda and
just freestyle.
Yep. Ian has 10 agents. Okay, Ian, that's why you started off with let's go. Okay.
Ian wants to do 50 million next year. I love it. We're throwing numbers out, guys. Revenue numbers.
Yeah, we're getting
hot.
Yeah.
Cool. 5-star bath. 10 people in our call center for 7 locations with an awesome manager. All right.
Gina is in the house. So glad you can make it.
This is great. You guys have a great group. Well, this will be fun. It looks like we've got some really great we get to talk up and down the call center, which will be kind of fun because we have call centers of all sizes. So we should be able to talk about like what it looks like small, what it looks like big. And this should be really cool.
Yeah. Well, let's get after it. Cool. A quick little tidbit about Hatch. For those of you who don't know, we are an AI CSR platform for contact centers. Bottom line is when you can automate and streamline your communication and save time while doing it, you get a better customer experience, you get higher conversion and retention, there's less drudge work, and you can scale up and down with seasonality and fluctuations without the overhead costs. So that's just our quick little pitch on Hatch. Now I'm going to introduce our speakers. Chris, why don't you go ahead and just give a quick little beatbox, maybe?
Yep. Quick freestyle.
Yep.
I'm Chris. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Hatch, and I love all things contact center. I'm really actually excited today because we're talking to an owner operator, John, who has built one of these. And I think the advice that he's going to talk about is just invaluable. So I'm pretty stoked.
Yeah. And John, you're up.
Yeah. So I'm John Wilson. I own Wilson Plumbing and Heating up in Cleveland, Ohio. Actively using Hatch. It's been a pretty big game changer for us this year, and we love it. And then also it's up there. I'm the co-host of Owned and Operated podcast. So if you want to hear about growing your plumbing, HVAC, or electric business, check it out. Owned and Operated.
Yeah. And I'll definitely be dropping a link in the chat for people that want to subscribe. All right. One more quick slide, just a quick agenda, but like we said, we may just scrap that, but we're going to try to follow.
Ian, get out of here.
We're going to talk about John's call center, just the ins and outs of it. We're going to just basically pull back the curtain on that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Wilson and plumbing and heating using Hatch. Then we're going to talk about AI. We'll get into some of the roadmap stuff for Hatch AI, and then we'll have Q&A at the end. If you have questions though, and you got to get that question out there and you can't wait because sometimes you're going to forget, put it in the chat. If you see it disappear, it's because I have moved it to the Q&A tab. So don't worry, you have not been erased or canceled. I have just moved your question. That being said, I'm going to take it off of the slides. Now we just have our faces. All right, so let's dive in. Inside the contact center. So John, give us a quick, first of all, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of you. You've got a popular podcast, but maybe just introduce like your podcast and the kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah, and I suspect most of them have not heard of me, and that's great. I'm a plumber up in Cleveland, guys. It's not that complicated. So 3 or 4 years ago, we were starting to acquire to grow. We were a small company, $2 or $3 million, and for some reason, I felt compelled to share on the internet the journey. And people have really enjoyed reading it, and they've enjoyed listening to it. So, over the past 4 years, we've chronicled going from $2-3 million a year and sort of my thoughts on building that business to now wrapping up mid-20s and mid-30s next year as budget. So it's all the good stuff and all the bad stuff along the way of that, of that journey. And it's been a lot of fun. I've made a ton of friends. I've gotten to meet a lot of really cool people that have helped me continue to grow and progress. And that's really the inspiration behind sharing on the internet.
Love it. I mean, There are podcasts and things out there that are like mainly for like SaaS or software companies, right? But like, it sounds like you're kind of the first of its kind for like an HVAC or a service-based company.
There's a few others, so there's Tommy Mello's got a great show. Chad Peterman has a great show, and I think the thing that sets us apart, or at least makes us more relatable, is like Tommy Mello's $250 million. And that's not relatable. Whereas like, hey, I'm still in the thick of it, right? We're a 2-market business. We're still actively driving every day. So I think the conversations that we have on the show every week, or what we write about every Friday in the newsletter, is stuff actively happening in our business. And it's a much more approachable problem versus Tommy Mello is really inspirational and he's done amazing things, but he's also $250 million. And like his problems are just different than my problems. Whereas my problems, probably a lot of the group has my exact same problems. So yeah. I think that's a part of the success that we've had with it, is it's just more approachable than some of the other content out there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Chris, I'll let you speak to this a little bit, but you've spoken to a lot of our customers, and this is kind of what they're in the weeds of like, what do I do? Like, how do I turn this into a rinse and repeat set of processes that I can scale? I'm assuming that you hear that a lot in your conversations with customers.
Yeah. I mean, our customers are broken down into like really 2 segments: emerging and like larger. And our larger customers generally are doing 30 million plus, and emerging are just trying to get there. And what's interesting is there's just a lot more emerging just in volume than there are 30, 50, $100 million business, but they're all trying to kind of do the same thing at that stage, which is build the contact center or really improve the contact center and make it a profit center, something that actually makes a ton of money and helps with efficiencies and like takes it to the next level, so that they don't waste their money on leads and things don't slip through the cracks. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why I'm stoked to talk about this today, because I think a lot of people are in this stage where it's like, hey, we're emerging. We've built the call center. What's next? What did it take to get here? How did I add outbound to it? When do I go to 10 agents, 5? How do I think about that? Where does it break? And then, of course, what are the mistakes we've made along the way? John hasn't made any, but he's heard of some. So he can probably share some of that
other people have shared their mistakes with me. Again, I haven't made any.
Cool.
Totally
Me neither.
perfect.
Me neither.
All right. So on that note, what do you think the best way? Like I was gonna say, like, can you want to give the lay of the land of your contact center? Do you think that's a good place to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, so I'm gonna probably go a little bit broader than what some people might consider to be contact center, but it also might be up other people's alley. So there's a few distinct roles inside our call center. So we have dispatcher, we have inbound call taker, we have outbound, we have written, and inside sales, and those are the 5 key positions inside our call center. Some people don't consider dispatch to be a part of it. For us, it's all in the same section of the building, so we consider it to be roughly the same.
Okay.
The difference between the roles, if that would help sort of define them.
Yeah, but before you begin, I took notes. Is it dispatcher, inbound, outbound, call taker, writer, inside sales? Did I get that right?
Yeah, basically, we segregate the written leads from inbound call leads.
Call lead.
Okay.
Yeah, different agents.
Okay, got it. All right. So yeah, if you want to go through the differences between those roles.
Yeah, and there's a few other. I think when you start off smaller, I saw a few folks in the chat that had 2 or 3 agents. So it's totally okay if you have people carrying multiple loads. Like, that's how that works, right? Scaling a business is turning generalists into specialists into experts on repeat until the end of time. So each role does something a little bit different. So dispatcher organizes the board, basically. So they're going to take a full board that the call takers filled, and they're going to optimize that board. They're going to put the best tech on the right call. They're going to potentially, if you have install coordination or if you don't, they're going to help coordinate installs. So if you sell a fence or if you sell a roof or if you sell a furnace or whatever it is, they may help either with that handoff or actually schedule it itself. But really, their logistics is probably a better way to think about a dispatcher. And this is one of the more confusing roles for smaller companies, is when do I need my first dispatcher? And the answer is usually like $3 million. So if you're looking for that benchmark, $3 million is normally when you separate call taking from dispatch. The next role was inbound call center.
John, I have a question on the dispatcher.
Yeah.
At 3 million, is that simply just because the volume is too much to do 2 jobs? Is that when that?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of 2 different things. Like, so the smaller the company, if you have 2 or 3 agents, they may be doing both. So
right.
If I walked into like a $2 million plumbing company and they have 2 or 3 people answering the phone, probably 2 people, they are probably both picking up the calls and dispatching the calls.
Yep.
Could be lack of sophistication, could be not enough volume. But really, they're totally different skill sets, right? Like, being a dispatcher is optimizing revenue, and that's actually the KPI that you use for, is dispatcher effective? It's, did you hit revenue budget? Because that means you put the right people on the right opportunity. Whereas a call taker, their job is just to book the appointment, and that's it. But
Yep.
once the appointment's booked, that's when dispatch starts their job.
Got it. 2 different skill sets.
Yeah.
And then volume or skill sets triggers that separation into 2 roles.
Right.
Eventually.
Right.
Okay.
And yeah,
Cool.
the reason 3 million usually makes sense is 5 to 6 technicians, a dispatcher can start to make a real impact.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah. So inbound call center is what it sounds like. They're taking either written, email, SMS, or phone call leads, and their job is to literally just book the call. So that's the whole accountability. A good measurement that we use that could be helpful to people is we expect 80 calls a day per CSR. So if you're trying to figure out when it's time to add that next person, 80 is a good number for us. Now, I have heard of people that have numbers way higher than that, but 80 is a number that we feel pretty comfortable with. Next one was outbound, and our inbound call takers do some outbound in order to hit that 80 number. But the outbound call takers, all they do, it's pure outbound. So that one's pretty straightforward. And just trying to give benchmarks here, we usually expect 100 to 120 phone calls a day out from those team members. Do you have any questions on those ones?
Just, John, with the outbound, how do you keep them busy? How are you segmenting lists so that they always have something to do to hit that number?
Yeah, I mean, list segmentation, we do a few things. So some of it could be seasonal. So, hey, we need to go, it's cold now. So now we're going to do furnace tune-ups or boiler tune-ups, or we have members. So it's time to do our water heaters or electrical walkthroughs. So we can use sort of annual. And if they don't have anything, then we just start rolling off of a list. Hey, we haven't been to your house in 2 years. We're going to call you and offer you a promotion. Now, we also use Hatch in a very similar way.
Right.
We just segment the lists differently.
Interesting. Very cool.
Yeah.
And do you have a revenue number per outbound rep? Just curious that they like represent, or is the KPI is really output and the rest just happens because
KPI is output. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like we could give a number for how much they've added. It was roughly $1 million of revenue per. But there's like tertiary benefits. It's a little bit harder to track.
Yep.
We're trying to find a way, but it's a little bit harder to track.
No, I get it. Attribution's tough anyway, but there's probably a halo effect to what they do too, right? Like that just happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest, and I would say that this is where Hatch has really come in to help us a lot. On the outbound section, like if we really think about what outbound is, it's controlling your leads. And like if you have a gap leads, it was 80 degrees in November. And I run an HVAC company and I'm in the north. So like 80 degrees in November is not like good. Like that's bad. Like, you know, we're expecting breakdowns. We're expecting no heats. So what outbounds and what Hatch gives us the ability to do is it allows us to automate our lead process for leads that we've essentially already purchased. So, hey, I already have this customer's data. I already know what's going on in their house. It's time to offer them a promo, or it's time to schedule our tune-up or whatever it is. So it gives us more control, which eases out our schedule, but also makes it much easier to continue to recruit. Because if I want to go hire 2 more people, all I have to do is call more people or send more messages, and then I can bring on whoever I need while I ramp up my spend for marketing.
Interesting. Totally makes sense. Great.
Yeah, I'll quickly say that when I get on the call with customers, like for success stories and things like that, it's almost the first thing that comes out of their mouth. They're like, we've already paid for that lead. We don't want to let it go. Because if you think about, we had a webinar a couple weeks or maybe a couple months ago with John Ryan, and he was like, you don't a lead on Google or whatever may cost $300 or $400. And yes, compared to the size of a job, that may not be that much. But if you picture yourself actually handing out $300 for a lead, it makes a bigger difference. So,
yeah. Well, and how do you ramp up your LTV?
Right.
Yeah. Which I think that's the problem that we're all trying to unpack here is how do we ramp up our LTV? How do we create some consistency inside our schedule? And how do we float through seasonality?
Yep.
100%.
Next big role is inbound written. And really that's just, we get a lot of volume of emails. So some people have that inside call takers. We like to segment that out because I just think it's a totally different discipline. I really want to be able to monitor, which is one of the harder things that happens the bigger the call center gets, is like, hey, what's the actual measurable here? And are we hitting it? Like, are we hitting 80 a day in? Are we hitting 100 a day out? How do we measure that? And when you're hitting those, how do we optimize you? How do we coach you to get better? How do we increase our book rates? So we found inbound written to be very messy because people kept saying like, oh, I can't do my 80 in. I'm responding to emails, and we couldn't find a great solution to really attribute their time to know. But, suddenly half of the call center was all saying that they were doing emails. And I'm like, guys, we don't have that many emails. I am sensing some deceit. Yeah. So we split that off. Some people have it in the same, but for us, I really like to know that you're doing a good job without having to, really know. And then final one is inside sales. And inside sales for us is rehash. So rehash means I went out and I gave someone an estimate and we did not close on site. And then we sent them a follow-up message in order to attempt to close, which obviously I think that's one of the main value props of Hatch.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, from here, I'd love to kind of talk about like the growing pains. So like like you haven't always had the structure, right? So when did you were there certain like milestones where you were like, we need to split this up? I mean, you kind of talked about it already, but what are some of the things that you have had to learn the hard way?
This whole discipline had to learn the hard way. So, last year, LSA had some real challenges. So if you're inside plumbing, HVAC, or electric, or another home service that uses Google local service ads, in 2023, it sort of hit a wall. Leads dried up, spend went way up, and it became a big issue. So outbounding became a result of that. So before that, that was nearly $20 million of revenue, we had never meaningfully built an outbound structure inside our call center. And the only reason we did build it was because we were struggling to continue to grow. And we're like, man, we just I don't know where to find these leads. We're just really trying to find it. And then we looked and we're like, oh my gosh, we have 80,000 customer contacts in our CRM. And it felt like the dumbest moment of my life where I was like, I don't think we ever talked to these people. And that's 80,000 people. That's an insane number. And I think one of the funnier things, and it makes me feel a little bit better about myself, is I talk to a lot of people and I'm like, hey, how many people are in your customer list? And they're like, 50,000. I was like, oh, when was the last time you talked to them? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, oh my God, thank God it wasn't just me. Because I would have felt stupider than I did. So we really learned this and built this discipline as a result of needing it desperately because we wanted to keep growing. We had to keep our schedule full, and seasonality is a big challenge in HVAC. So we wanted to be able to go through a slow season without a hiccup. So that was why we built the whole outbound discipline. As far as lessons learned through the call center, most of it's just been role segregation and how do you measure each position? Because I think, we've overstaffed our call center at various times. We've understaffed it at various times because we didn't really understand the 80 call a day benchmark or the 100 out benchmark, or that, hey, you don't need, 20 people checking email. So I think most of the reason we've segregated is we've continued to learn these lessons and just sort of tighten the screws on getting better. All right. Sean in the chat just said he's got 140,000 in. Does that mean you've also never followed up? Because that makes me feel better too. Or are you just telling me something different? But yeah, so I think that's a lot of how we learned was we got into this because it was difficult. And we were just really trying to drive leads and keep stuff consistent. And then growing the call center is just a ton of pain. You create a new role every time you have a pain point.
I think too, just to chime in on this, because Ray asked a great question. So what do you need to know about the new TCPA rules? Of course, using Hatch to reach out to old leads, these things are always changing. It's interesting because what you're describing, e-com businesses have been doing forever, right? Which is they build a subscriber list. They get you to opt in, and they stay in touch with you quite often and offer you stuff, and they keep you up to date and they talk to you quite a bit. Offline businesses haven't really picked up on that quite yet. And so one of my missions next year is to help us build that, not only to stay TCPA compliant, but getting people to opt in to continue to talk to you. You'll have 18 months to do it, but you're going to have to do it again to get them back in to say, yeah, I want to continue to talk to you. And most people do, actually. In fact, if you offer something of value, whether it's a discount or or some incentive to keep it going, like most people do. I mean, think about yourself. If I get a text, it's like, hey, it's that time of year. You want us to, power wash your house or what? I'm like, yeah, sure. Shoot, I forgot about that. Especially if you're in the neighborhood and I get some sort of discount. So like there's ways to do this, just like e-com has built these giant businesses with that same strategy. So we're going to help out there too by helping people build an opt-in list, because I think that's going to be important as these rules continue to come out.
Yeah. Yeah. We really think of it as lead nurturing, which
Exactly.
I think other industries do much better than plumbing, HVAC, electric. It's pretty standard for plumbing, HVAC, electric. Like you'll hear, and I've said this too. So, past John, but you'll hear people say like, oh man, Angie's List doesn't work. I can't get a hold of them or whatever. And like sometimes 100% that's the case. But often you dig a little bit deeper, you double click on it, and they called one time. Like the company called that customer one time. They left a voicemail and the customer didn't call back. If I had, we have a running joke because we have Leaf Home, which is a massive, gutter guards, and they're headquartered just up the road from us. And my president had contacted Leaf one time, like 4 years ago, for his house. And Leaf is still nurturing that lead. Like it's almost once a quarter, he'll get a call from them like, hey man, you ready to, and maybe they're going too hard on this, but that's a heck of a lot better than what most businesses in my industry do, which is we try one time and then we never try again. So I think the lead nurturing aspect of it, whether or not you've driven $1 from that customer, the lead nurturing aspect of it is pretty powerful.
It's a huge part of it. And I don't know if everybody on the call is familiar with sort of what's happening with the lead ads that quote unquote don't work. I think they do work. You have to stay on top of them, but things are going to get interesting because what's happening is they're all rolling out what they call masked leads. John, have you heard about this?
Yes, but I've only heard about it.
All right. I'll give you the 30,000 foot view. So basically consumers go online today, they fill out their information, you get that contact information, including cell phone, email, and name, and you reach out to them, right? That's how it works today. How it's going to work in the future is all that information is going to come to you, but it's going to be masked. So it's not going to be the real email. It's not going to be the real phone number. So now it's on the job of the business that's buying that lead to get that information. So we're going to help with that with AI. It's going to be awesome. We're actually partnering with these folks to do it. But knowing that it's going to be even more important to stay on top because it's going to be masked for 30 days. And then it sort of goes away if you don't do a good job of follow-up. So, and on top of that change, instead of them being able to give that lead out to multiple people, they're only going to give it out to one person. And so, but that's timed. And so it's going to move around. I guess the point of me saying that is putting a system around nurturing it and communication and multiple attempts with a purpose and intent is going to be worth the investment, or you're going to be, it's literally like taking $300 and just putting fire to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And Vanessa just said this in the chat, that Angie's already doing that. And yeah, I think that's right. Cause I'm pretty sure this came up a couple weeks ago because we actually just started using Angie's List again, because our lead nurturing has sort of matured enough to be able to take on more lead ags.
Yep.
And yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, very much so. Just to go, Kristen, while the questions come in, I think they're so interesting and they're relevant to what we're talking about. So Jay's asking John about what kind of close rates do you see your inside salespeople getting?
Yeah, we don't track it in a way that makes that question easy to answer. So how we look at it is attributed additional revenue. So we expect 200,000 a month per inside sales closer in attributed revenue. Some people expect more. Some people expect less. I have a friend in Minnesota, and he only has 2, whereas we have 4. But his 2 do 350 a piece, which is like, there's a lot going on there. I think when you're looking at inside sales, probably the better way to look at this, aside from just total volume, is inside sales only works if you're not closing in the home. So if your close rate is 50%, add inside sales. Like you'll probably go up to 55% close rate. Like you'll add a few points and that's going to be a win. If your close rate's 80%, it's going to be much less of an impact because there's 20% left. So I think that's, you have to look at your own business, but for us, 50% is our in-home close rate. So there's still, enough to be interesting.
Yeah. Makes sense. And you measure inside reps on total revenue, not their close rate of the ones they're working. You just measure total revenue. I mean, makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good KPI. Another question in here that I want to address is, well, Gina asks, when is this going to happen? It depends on the type of account that you have with Angie's. Their enterprise accounts aren't happening for a while, but our system is ready for it. And in fact, we partnered with them on building an AI agent that's able to follow up with those mass leads and ask people for their real information and then update that information automatically, which will happen in Hatch. It's pretty cool. So we've actually been working on this for like 6 months with them because this is a federal law that's been in the works for a while that's actually going into play. So Gina, my answer is happening in Angie now for some accounts. Other larger accounts, it won't be happening until like January, February, but we got it set up and ready fully through our integration where we should be able to take that without a hitch. And then Jeremy asked a question. How do you avoid getting marked spam for your outbound? But this is the opt-in strategy I was talking about. I'll give you guys, I mean, it's a little bit anecdotal, but we're working with customers on this, which is when a customer comes into a business and asks for a product or service and reaching out to them, your opt-out rates can be very low on those, like less than 1%, right? Because it's happening right in the moment. After that person gets either the service they inquired about or they don't buy, and you do your follow-up, that's the moment where you need to reach out to the customer with either a campaign through Hatch or some way and say, hey, we understand. We'd love to keep you on the list. Can you opt in? And here's an incentive to opt in. This is what e-com businesses have been doing this all. They call it abandoned cart. There's different words that they use in other types of industries, but you need to get your prospects and customers to say, sure, you can reach out to me periodically. And it's called an opt-in strategy. We're going to have that also in the product, but it works beautifully because once they opt in, every quarter when you reach out to book a recurring service or you reach out to past customers about getting the rest of their estimate completed or whatever it is, they're not taken off guard. They don't opt out. They're having conversations with you. So it's just adding an opt-in strategy to your customer lifecycle, I guess you can call it.
Yep. One of those touch points. And Gina and others on the call, we're doing a webinar on TCPA in January, so stay tuned for that. One thing I want to talk about, we were talking about this briefly right before the webinar. John, you were talking about how like speed to lead and sales follow-up is more of a like mature strategy. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think once you start thinking about your unsolds or your customer list, it's sort of like obvious, right? But for most companies, it's really not that obvious. And I have friends that either work at or own like very large, 9-figure home service companies that do not have a mature follow-up process. They may have a mature speed to lead process. It's obviously hard to get there without a pretty good speed to lead process, but the way they handle rehash, the way they do follow-ups, or even like outbound messaging in order to book often is not that sophisticated, which I think is kind of funny. We obviously wish that we would have started our outbound strategies and our inside sales much earlier in our business's development than we did. We started at roughly $20 million. But yeah, it really is a mature move because the contact center has to be big enough that you can adequately handle your inbounds, you can properly dispatch, and you have good enough customer records that you can reliably follow up on them. Which most small home service contractors might not be able to say that. Like good, bad data is pretty common when you're looking at some of these CRMs. Or does the CRM even allow it? I think that's another one. I'm sure there's ways to download it and bring it over to Hatch, but a lot of CRMs are kind of very difficult to get information out of. So we seem, in my peers, I have a lot of friends in this like 20 to 50 range. Only about half of them have a sophisticated rehash or customer recontact setup, which again, I find surprising, but I was also in the same boat a year and a half ago.
It's so interesting because I talk to people about this and they're like, they know it exists. It's an obvious thing to do, but yet they still don't prioritize it.
Yeah.
John, we talked about this right before the call, but like, what are the top 2 reasons why they don't prioritize it? Is it lack of understanding of how to execute or how they'll measure it? And it feels like it's a waste of time and money where there's other fires to put out, or what's the hesitation?
Yeah, I think, so I'll give my own thoughts and I'll just tell you what other people have told me.
Yeah.
I think my own thoughts here is it's really hard to guess the impact. So if I'm like, hey, my guy, I want you to invest a ton of money into a bunch more people to outbound your existing customers to maybe get more money out of them. Let's do it. I think that's kind of a tough sell. We all want to manage our overhead.
Yeah.
How do we make that appear or feel like a profit center instead of just a raw cost?
Yeah.
Which we can talk about how we did it. But I think that's a part of the thing is like, hey, we're adding overhead. Like this is overhead.
Now we got to make money. We got to make it.
How do I get comfortable with that? Right.
Yeah.
How do I get my head around the fact that I just added static cost? So I think that's why they back end it. The reason, some of the answers people have told me is like, man, I've never really thought about that. And I'm like, how have you never thought about that? And they're just so focused on the in-home sale. And this is just for inside sales rehash only.
Yep.
They're so focused on that inside sale that they don't really think much about it. And they just assume that their salesperson's going to follow up. Well, hey, my salesperson's full commission. Why would I add a salary to follow up with these? And like your salesperson probably is not following up. Like some do. Your best ones probably are. But the rest of them probably aren't.
Yeah. And that's not
follow up.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. It's, in my world, that's not a bug. That's a feature. Like it's like
it's how it works.
It's how it works. You can't really do much about it.
Yeah, most of our customers, like or not most, but I know a lot that I've talked to, like either they have somebody in Hatch that is basically dedicated to that, just following up on estimates, or they use Hatch almost as like what's the word? A nudge, because sales reps know that if they don't follow up on the lead, Hatch will follow up on the lead, and then they don't get the same compensation.
Right.
Oh, interesting.
So that's kind of how ours works, where like, hey, you've got 24 hours to close this thing, and our automated communication that we will not turn off starts at hour 24. Like that's how it works.
Yep.
So if you want full bore commission, go get it. Otherwise, we had to professionalize. We had to professionalize the follow up.
Yep. And that also comes to, sorry, Chris, one last thing, and then I'll let you talk.
Keep interrupting me. It's fine.
The CRM, it comes down to the data hygiene too, because then you're building audiences in Hatch based on the disposition. So like if the sales rep, they've called, like they need to disposition that they are following up with that lead, right? Because like maybe they called a few times and the lead hasn't responded back, but that comes down to having accurate data and also having a CRM that supports that. And then Hatch, we've worked really hard to create an audience builder that makes that data in your CRM accessible, because we all know it's kind of a nightmare to try to sift through all that's available to you.
100%.
That makes sense. One thing I wanted to say, because I think Jay's comment in the Q&A answers some of the stuff that John was talking about, but I'm not sure. I want to run it past John. So he's sort of asking, hey, what jobs are they selling? Like what segment of customers are they targeting in order to produce revenue? John, when you were thinking about doing this rehash, is that how you started to wrap your mind around the revenue impact this could have if you built an operation around it? Did you look at the job site? Like, okay, if I close 30, 30% of these, whatever, 100 customers a month, voila, there's $200,000. I don't know if you thought about it like that, but
we really approached it from revenue impact,
okay.
And which is still how we approach it. and maybe that'll change one day, but that it's just the easiest way to measure it in my mind. So, yeah, we went into it saying, I believe we can get $200,000 more a month per inbound. And how we looked at that was, what is the total number of unsold estimates a month?
Right.
And
regardless of type, right?
Regardless of anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't really do type. I think I'm looking at Jay's question. I'm just going to read it out real quick. What types of jobs are they selling? Full systems, indoor air quality quotes, repairs, all of the above. When people start their inside sales program, they will usually just focus on the big stuff. The systems, the roof, the fence, the drive, whatever the big thing is. We have a lot of success doing that, but we also have a lot of success going smaller. And I would say that our inside sales team is bigger than, more developed maybe than some of my peers, because we go after all of it. We staff it appropriately. And then I'm giving Hatch a big nudge here, but Hatch gave us like the sort of force multiplier, where if I was going to have 100 phone calls a day and only 10 people would pick up, now what Hatch lets us do is it contacts all of those same people, but we only talk to the people that respond. So it like really enhanced our performance quite a bit, but they're selling everything. So anything that's an unsold estimate, we want to be able to go after. I think it's a mistake to just focus on the big stuff, because the small stuff's high margin. There's a lot of it. You still need it to fill schedules. And you should just, I think if you're thinking about how to create an impact, it's like, what does the compensation of the inside sales look like? So you should set it up so that they can win depending on what type it is. So we have, the way ours works is it's 3% for the big thing, 5% for service jobs. So we actually want to encourage more service jobs because there's so much more estimates there and the margins are higher.
Love it.
That's great. I did throw a thing. I threw a comment in here from Ray. It wasn't a question, but I just wanted to highlight it. He said, we recently booked a lead from 2019 and sold it for $15K.
Yeah.
This goes to show. And I think there was another comment in there too about somebody booking somebody from like, I don't know, a couple of years ago as well.
Yeah.
There you have it.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's almost ridiculous. We closed one last week that was from a year ago.
Yeah, Ian made an interesting comment. Did you notice a drop off in contact rates in October and November, maybe attributed to robo political calls? No kidding about this. The political text messages got out of control. There's a bunch of lawsuits going on because of how that, like it absolutely, the carriers were not on top of it, and by they were using AI to try to block a lot of that stuff. But we've already seen a change in the past like 3 weeks of the contact rates going back up. I think that had a major part to do with it, from what I've heard from our vendors and carriers. Interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
John, are you guys using? Well, you're using Hatch, so I know you have Speed to Lead and Sales Follow Up, but you guys have quite a few other campaigns. I think you do memberships too, right?
Yeah, we. I mean, automated communication is like a superpower. Right. So I think it's almost once a week, sometimes twice, we'll come up with a different use case. And that use case, I think right now they're using it for like a campaign. So usually our campaigns is like, okay, I'm going to turn this thing on. It's going to run forever. We have one going right now, and I think it's like a 25-day Christmas campaign in order to drive a very specific promo. Yep. So that's been a lot of fun. We recently paired it with another piece of our tech stack that helped us identify old equipment. So we were able to use both of those pieces of information and make that a win. We added campaigns to update customers. So that's been good. We're going to be doing something with what we're calling sales enablement. So if I book a specific job type, we want to preload options into a customer's mind before we go out, and we're going to be using Hatch to sort of help that process along. I'm sure there's more. I mean, I think it's dozens at this point. Yeah. We really like we continue to use it, and I think I know we're here to talk about like inside the contact center. I just want to plug this because I think that this was one of the reasons that we liked Hatch specifically, was it is very easy for us to build a campaign. Whereas where we previously came from, you literally had to get a developer involved in order to drive any meaningful campaign changes. Whereas like you guys came out of the box with the ability to do quite a bit.
It's awesome.
I love it. Hey, Kristen, before I know we're running up on time, I did want to pick John's brain a little bit about AI.
Yeah,
And-
that was going to be my next thing. So
Yeah, just real. It's the buzzword. Everybody I talk to is talking
It's the
about
buzzword.
it.
I've decided to go Wilson Plumbing and Heating.ai.
Oh, you're doing it. You're doing it. You're
It's
doing
needed. It's needed. I don't know what to tell you, man. Like,
It's just I talked to my phone and my toilet's fixed.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
but
this is called innovation at work. But sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, in all seriousness, it's I'm probably on 3 calls a day with customers that are implementing our AI product, and it's just interesting to hear the point of view of everybody, where it's making impacts in the contact center today, where you see it making impacts in the contact center tomorrow. So, like, just your quick 2-minute, John, on where you guys are, and then also how you see it impacting as you continue to grow this thing.
Yeah, I've got a great analogy for this. What I think is a great analogy for this.
All right.
So you've got at the top, you've got expensive American labor. The next is offshored labor. The next is software. And the final is AI. And that's like how we think about driving changes or new processes into our business. You can interchange AI and software however you want, but that's sort of how we think about this. So if I'm going to have a call center and they're going to pick up the phone when my customer calls, I have those 4 options available to me on how I want to handle that customer communication. I can hire an American worker. I can hire somebody in the Philippines. I can have a software that somehow handles all of it. And I can have an AI agent. So depending on where we are, maybe the time of the day, the weekend, whatever, it could be any one of those 4 for Wilson. And we've continued to add more in. And the more we've added, obviously, we have ended up reducing our American exposure because it's expensive. So we've added, so we have American call center folks in office and remote. We have a lot of Philippines folks. And then we have software. So maybe that's online booking or whatever. And then obviously AI is a new addition to our call center in the past 9 or 10 months. And we went pretty slow with it. But right now we do have AI answering the phone for us, which is kind of wild.
Did you start with Overflow with the phone calls? Yeah.
We started with like not even Overflow. I get 1 call a day between midnight and 5 a.m. So I started with that.
Okay.
Pretty low risk.
Yep.
If somebody didn't like it, they would just leave. Because we get about 1,000 phone calls a day inside our call center. So I was very hesitant to just like toss an AI at that.
Of course.
So it was a lot. So we're 9 months in, and it's been good. So the way that we use it inside call center is we have 2 functions for AI right now. We'll add more, but the 2 functions currently are live answering. So it will answer the phone, and if it gets stumped, then it actually transfers it to a human. So like, hey, if you ask it a question, because that's usually the thing that breaks on these call center AIs is the question, was too complicated. What happens? It just transfers it like basically immediately. They call that human in the loop, if that helps. Like a human's always capable of grabbing it.
Yep.
And then the second is coaching. So it's a tremendous burden to listen to 1,000 phone calls a day in order to coach your call center team on how to do better. So we were able to bring on an AI coach.
That's so cool. And then real quick, like 3 years from now, do you imagine, like, what do you think your call center is going to look like? Do you think it's going to look like a couple high-paid American workers that are sort of orchestrating the AI, or do you not see much change happening? I mean, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect more AI, more Philippines, maybe one American. You know, I have I have people in my industry, 20, $30 million businesses, 12 to 15 agents,
Yep.
and not a single one is US.
Interesting.
So I really think, it's obviously going to displace workers. And I think, you end up with just like an engineer, somebody that understands maybe not the program, but at least how it functionally works, sort of managing the top. But yeah, it should save OpEx. I
Yep.
heard a good analogy for this. I saw this tweet like a couple weeks ago. Jeff Bezos was saying, always famous for saying, your margin is my opportunity. And the AI version of that is your OpEx is my opportunity.
Yeah. That's so interesting. It's like voice AI is going to be a tentpole product for us in 2025 because it completes sort of the outbound motion, I think.
Oh yeah.
And we have so many text conversations, like over 350 million, that, you know, we've been able to train, a bot that doesn't hallucinate. And I think what we're seeing happen is actually, it's not as much a reduction in force as I saw. What I'm seeing is the best people are keeping their jobs, but they're understanding how to teach and train these systems better.
Yep.
But then when there's a need for another head, whoever's making that decision saying, do I actually need another head, or do I just keep my staff and figure out a way to get them to train a bot to go handle this problem?
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is we can't, at least today. And then sometimes the answer is, yeah, we actually can, because it's pretty rinse and repeatable, right? Like it is actually something that can be trained and done in a way that's, predictable, and the results are good, which is really what matters.
Yeah. I think the way,
Interesting.
one of the more influencing like thoughts behind this, we did an interview on our show. I want to say it was like 7 months ago.
Right.
And it was with Tyson Chen, and he's the co-founder of Avoca. And his philosophy was, hey, we put all this energy and time into making sure that we put the right salesperson on the right opportunity. Why don't we do the same thing with our calls? So why don't we have the right CSR for the right call? And that's been something that we've been working on basically since he said that. So one of the sort of more tactical approaches that we've used AI, aside from just using it, is we will pair by job type. We will pair by lead type.
The right lead with the right rep skill set.
Right.
Interesting.
So
okay,
we
cool.
want, like, I'll give a even deeper into this. Our raw book rate, which means if I take 1,000 phone calls a day, our raw book rate might be 19%, which means I booked 190 phone calls. And that's pretty normal. Yep. And if you're like, dude, how? Like, that's crazy. Like, what the heck is the other 810 phone calls? That's customers calling. That's people canceling. That's vendors calling. That's people asking for accounting, or people trying to get a hold of HR. Like, those are total phone calls in to appointments booked. So a good measurement is somewhere between 20 and 30 is pretty normal for my industry, which is insane. So that means you have all of this labor tied up into answering phone calls that don't drive you a single dollar. Like, it's just sort of a waste. So one of the more tactical approaches to AI for us has been, okay, how do we just reduce the burden of those 800 daily phone calls that aren't helping us at all, and put our very best people who are currently burdened by those calls, how do we put them onto the 190 that are the most important? Which is a really similar approach to what we've taken with inside sales and Hatch, which is, hey, if my inside sales people are just calling all day out, but they're only getting a hold of 10 people a day, how can I augment that with a software that automates a lot of the communication, and then every conversation we have is impactful.
Is inbound. Yeah. Interesting. That's great, dude. Well, I love the insight. That's cool.
Before we go to the next question, I want to just let you guys know I'm going to launch a poll. So if you are a Hatch user, I'm going to launch it now. it'll show up on your screen. If you're a Hatch user and if you have questions about Hatch AI or anything about your account, you can select A. And if you're not a Hatch customer but want to learn more about using Hatch, you can select option B. So with that, we have 6 minutes left. So let's
Let's use it to the max. Well,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it. It looks like there's only one question we actually didn't answer. It's from Matt Browning that says, how do you distribute follow-up responsibilities for follow-up between sales reps and inside sales reps? Actually, John, I think you answered this a little bit. You have like 24 hours in between when in-home. Yeah. And after that 24 hours, it doesn't matter. You're sending that follow-up, and then the inside sales rep's going to take that inbound if a customer responds. Is that how it works?
Basically, yeah. So one of our learned lessons from this is you have to have a clear cutoff and professionalize your follow-up process.
Yep.
So I'll talk with some people that are like pretty new to the rehash inside sales game, and they say, with this guy, we have 3 days to follow up. This guy's got a week. This guy's got 2 days. So we just find it much easier to, hey, you got 24 hours period. You're welcome to follow up. But we are, it is just going to start at 24 hours.
John, and your best performers, they only need 24 hours, really, right? Like there's very rare when they're going to need that.
Yeah.
So that consistency just that's the professional process that really makes the impact, right? Because if you try, at least from what I've heard, if you try to give everybody exceptions, then everything becomes an exception kind of thing.
Yeah. I think it's easier. And this is just, maybe we're a little bit larger, but it's easier to just like, this is what it is for everyone, all, 60 reps. So here it is.
And they play within the sandbox. I love it.
Yeah.
And then it says, when should it be manual? And when do you have Hatch jump in? Everything's automated for you, right? After 24 hours, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's the way.
Yeah, pretty much. And then ideally, the way we run it is the moment they engage back, so they're going to message or do something, that's when it's a first come, first serve for inside sales. So whoever is there jumps on it, and then they own that conversation.
Love it. I love that. I think that's it. Did we answer all of them? From what I can see, that's all the Q&As.
There is one more Q&A. Ian wanted to know if there were any issues with AI hallucinations. I think that was in regards to Avoca AI, John. But if you want to answer that, and then Chris, if you want to talk about Hatch AI hallucinations, we can close it out.
I'll just really quick. I don't know if it was in regards to a specific product or not, but what I would say is that AI hallucinations are just part of the industry right now. There's no way around it. What I will say is that we have seen the metrics that we measure, we have seen a dramatic improvement of hallucinations. I just think 18 months ago, we were seeing like a 90% accuracy. Now we're up to like 99.3% accuracy. With AI, that is insane. It is PhD level. If you just think about humans, like we don't even have 99% if you have 10 call reps, you're going to have one that does something a little bit off with their scripting or with how they should handle a specific situation. And so it's right up there with humans. And we're measuring that pretty intensely. So I think hallucinations are there, but they're getting less and less every day.
And I'll also add in that with the business profile and Hatch, that's the key part too, to maintain that accuracy so the bot is trained to ask certain things, but what happens when the customer asks a question that so the business profile gives the bot something to refer to. And when you look at it, it looks like a basic, Google business profile kind of thing, but there's no limit to what you can add into those fields. So our customers are just stocking that business pile up with details, facts, and information. And then if the bot does get something wrong, they just add it to the business profile. So it's almost like in the beginning, you got to go through those hallucinations. You can refine the business profile and have it running nicely from there.
Yeah, kind of like a new employee. John, do you want to add in about your experience with hallucinations?
Yeah, I think that's probably the importance of the human in the loop component for us.
Yep.
Where it just can't get very far. So the moment it starts to trip, it transfers. So we like that a lot. There are some solutions out there that are full AI. And obviously you have more problems.
Yep. Takes longer to set that up too.
Well, it's a training process. You hear another buzzword, generative AI, right? Like where it's fully comprehensive. And actually, we're pretty close. I think in the next 12 months, you're going to see some releases that are going to be pretty insane with that stuff. But there's a training component to it, and so you're going to have to train it on information that it needs to know, or it's going to make it up, or it's going to go to the internet to find it, things like this. And so I think it's all about, I would be thinking about how do you train this AI as it gets smarter and smarter, because it is going to be smart enough to really take any prompt or information you can give it and do really well with it, especially in the upcoming year. Yeah.
Kristen, I just saw your question regarding your question not being answered. I actually don't see your question. I think we can answer it quickly if.
Oh, maybe it was maybe it's in the chat, but not in the Q&A. It was a question from Kristen about a question.
Kelsey Waldhall.
Oh, Kelsey, how to choose what questions? Oh, my question is Kelsey. Let's see.
Oh,
I scrolled up. Kelsey, I don't see your question, so if you could resend it, I think we can answer it.
Yeah, and Kelsey, if you want to post it in the chat or Q&A, it's all good. Wherever you do it, we'll make sure we get to it. Jay has another one. How many touches does Hatch make after that 24 hours? Of course, you can customize it, but John, how many touches do you do after that 24 hours?
Oh, I just found Kelsey's question. It was answered.
Okay.
It says, can Hatch work in any industry? I believe so. I mean, I'm not Hatch, but I'm sure it can. I think it's just a lead nurturing software.
Yep. And we integrate with a whole bunch of lead sources and different CRMs to make sure you get data in there so they can do those things. Yes, Kelsey, the answer is yep. And then, John, how many touches after, what does your sales follow-up cadence look like? Let's just call it that. So you got the 24 hours, then Hatch grabs it. Is it like 1 on the first day, 3 on the third day? Like, do you have a
honestly, I'm pretty sure we took exactly what you guys had in your 90% response rate thing, and we just copied whatever that was. So I don't exactly remember what it was, but we were like 90% response rate. So I'm pretty sure we copied that verbatim.
in our templates is our templates actually learn. And so as we get monthly reports on who's getting the highest response rate, not based on content as much today, will be in the future, but on number of touches, we implement that into our template. So what you have should be our highest performer. Yep.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, that template is on our, it's in our blog. So you go to our blog, Hatch App, usehatchapp.com/blog. And I'll include this. We do a webinar recap, but I'll include what John is talking about. But we have a link to all of our templates. But the short answer is that sales follow-up template, I believe, is a 7-day. It's a 7-day sequence, and it just skips 1 day. So it's like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, I think, and then it skips. So yeah, it involves text and email.
And it is 7 days because we do have data that says after the 8th or 9th day, your percentage of being able to book that or get a response from the customer drops like 80%. You really have a week and a half to like make an impact with following up, or people just move on with their life. I mean, it's sort of common sense, but we do have the data around it.
But then you do the 6-month follow-up or the touch-up later, being like, hey, just checking in. And that's when
that's right. And we're seeing people add that opt-in step at the very end now to say, hey, look, it seems like you moved on. That's great. You should opt in so we can be in touch about things. And now you have a way to contact and continue to stay in touch. And we'll be adding that to our templates here soon as well.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks so much, both of you, for your time. John, this was fun. Chris.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
John, you're the man, dude. I'm keeping up with you and your podcast. Really cool.
Yeah. And like I said, we'll send, you'll get people that are on this webinar, you'll get the recording sent to you. And then we always do a recap later. So it's like a little, it's got the too long didn't read or watch recap. It's got the written stuff, got some video clips. So we'll have you guys covered.
Thanks, Kristen.
Right. See ya. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.